Hey there, everybody. This is Nate Gustafson. Thank you so much for joining me today. Wherever you are, however you might be viewing this presentation, I hope that it brings encouragement and strengthens your mission to advance hope, whether that's advancing hope in your home, whether that's advancing hope in the community, or whether that's advancing hope beyond your wildest imaginations. It's my pleasure to bring this to you as a part of an ongoing effort to build up an army of hope, build up people out there who are just like you, people who are wanting a better tomorrow for your family, better tomorrow for your children, a better tomorrow for the clients that you serve in your business, a better tomorrow for the patients that you work with in a clinic or a healthcare setting, a better tomorrow for beyond your wildest imagination, whether that's a dream you have to impact lives halfway across the globe, or whether that's to eventually one day become the expert in a field that you're passionate about. So I just want to again thank you so much for joining me today for this training, wherever you are, however you are joining us. It's my hope that this is an enlightening and encouraging experience for you. Today we're going to take a look at growing in our self-awareness. Wake up to better care. So I want you to think about, who were you when you were 21 or 22? Where were you when you were 21 or 22? Maybe that was last week and you were at Starbucks studying for a final exam. Maybe that was 5 years ago as you were hustling your way through college, and now you're newly married and have a young one on the way. Maybe that was decades and decades ago, that 21 seems like it was an entire lifetime ago. Think about that. Who were you back then? Who were you? You were probably your most idealistic self. You were probably your most passionate, enthusiastic, carefree self before the weight of the world and the new term, quote-unquote, adulting took over. For me, I know that was in the late 90s. I remember in 97, 98, those were pivotal years for me. I felt like I began to wake up for the very first time. Instead of just living on autopilot as I had gone through my teenage years, as I had gone through my young adult years in college, I began to wake up and realize that there's a lot going on underneath the surface waters of my life. That 90% of the iceberg that was only visible to me inside of my thoughts, my emotions, my will, my determination, my personality, I didn't ever take a look at that. I didn't know I could take a look at that. I just thought if I remained busy, dutiful, responsible, kept working hard, staying busy, accomplishing great things, and that would be a great life. That would be what I felt like God would want for me, what would be honoring to my family, and what would be exciting to live. But I was burning myself to a crisp. I was so burnt out back then. I had friends that would not want to even see me or be with me because I lacked the self-awareness to realize that I was just not a good person to be around in my most stressful moments. In my positive moments and my healthy moments, I still, now looking back on it with a little bit more awareness, realize that I was able to do a lot of good, help a lot of people. I could be a good friend. I could be a good son. But I needed to wake up. I needed a wake-up call, and it was burnout. It was the way people were responding to me that helped me wake up for the very first time and realize that there's stuff going on inside of me that I need to tune into. I need to take a look at. And so my hope for bringing this to us today is, whether you've been on a self-awareness journey for 40, 50, 60 years, or whether you're just trying to wake up yourself, you realize that there's more to life than what you've been doing right now. There's more to life than the busy schedule, the umpteen million phone calls and texts and messages that you need to return. That there's something more. There's something out there. There's something that if we would just peek beneath the waterline in our own heart, mind, body, soul, spirit, that we would see that we need to wake up, and we need to constantly be waking ourselves up so that we can have better care. We can take better care of ourselves. We can take better care of our families, our spouse, our children, our nephews, our nieces, our grandchildren. We can take better care of those entrusted to us, whether those are the clients that come into your small business, whether those are the patients that you serve in an intensive care unit, whether that's the hospice people that you provide care to as a volunteer or as a chaplain or social worker, or whether that's as a teacher with preschool children. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, we all need to wake up to better care. And so this is what this webinar today is all about. So let's take a look at some of the objectives that I hope that you'll be able to gain from our time together. The first objective is to understand what self-awareness is and why it's a key to effective caregiving. And again, caregiving could be caring for small children in your home. Caregiving could be helping your adult children just navigate the stresses of their world. Caregiving could be in a professional context, or it could be future care that you hope to be able to provide when you finish nursing school or medical school, or finish your master's degree in social work or counseling, or you take on your first assignment as a church pastor. Whatever that might be for you, I know that this is going to be helpful for you if you grow in your self-awareness, and understanding it is a key to caregiving. Our second objective, I want to help you learn how to evaluate your story, evaluate your life. Look at the pages of your story and evaluate those pieces of your story through what I call a 5-chapter framework. And we'll get into that in a little bit. The third objective I hope that you'll gain from today's viewing and listening and growing pleasure is that you'll identify dangerous, quote-unquote, landmines and realize how they impact the caregiving relationship. Finally, at the end of this presentation, you'll receive a resource list that I hope that you'll take the time to familiarize yourself. There's some books, some websites, some podcasting to listen to. I hope it'll really help you advance further in this mission as we advance hope together at home, in the community, and beyond. And one of the best ways that I know of in terms of advancing hope begins with a growing self-awareness. So let's begin. Knowing your story. We need to wake up and get our eyes on our story, the story of our life. So wake up to your story and realize that every life has a story. Every story has a plot. Whether it was the simple books that you read as a little child when you're first starting to read, see, spot, run. See, spot, jump. Spot is my dog. That has a story to it. It has a main character. It has action. It has subplot to it. Every story has a plot. Every story has a narrative plot line of twists and turns that takes you on this adventure. So the question I have for you as you're viewing this is, how well do you know your story? How well do you know your story? What's your story? Self-awareness at the most basic definition I could come up with is basically this: knowing your story. So let's dive in about knowing your story. So what are the benefits of knowing your story? You and I, if we're at all going to advance hope, advance the notion that there is a vision and a reality for a better tomorrow that we can help to create through our care, through our compassion, through our dedication, through our skill sets, through our wisdom, through our relationships. All of that is key, but all of that will become derailed in a heartbeat if we do not have a growing heart to empathize with those around us. We need to be able to not just have a minute ounce or two of care, but we need a growing, overflowing abundance of empathy and understanding. And we get so much of that because we learn to tap into our own story. We learn to recognize the benefits of what we've been through, the plot twists, the plot turns, the stabs in the back, the betrayals, the losses, the pain, the heartache. All of that is so important to pay attention to instead of run away from. That will help us to grow a heart with empathy. Next, a benefit to knowing your story, looking at the pages of your story, is that it'll give us vision to see in 3 dimensions: the front, the back, the sides, the up, the down, just to see completely all around us, a 360-degree view of our life, because we've taken the time to investigate and examine our own story. Another benefit, a growing ability to hear, to actively listen, growing hearing, a growing sense of hearing, using our five senses to actively listen to another person's story. By paying attention to our own story and getting curious about why we do what we do, why we say what we say, why we react in the manner that we react, it will help us to actively listen and ask the same questions of the people that we're working with. Again, whether that's on a very basic level with your 5-year-old or an 85-year-old grandparent or the client that you're hoping to help have a better tomorrow. We need a growing mind. We need to exercise the gray matter in between our ears, and that we exercise that, we grow our muscle memory and our mind as we seek to understand our story. And it'll give us a growing strength then to hold on, as this young lady is doing, obviously with a person who does not appear to be very well. But her strength is not always the physical strength to hold on. It's the emotional, the spiritual, the personal strength to hold on to a person's story, to lock eyes with this person, to communicate verbally and non-verbally that I am with you in this moment. Nothing else matters. Nothing else is important in this moment but myself and you and our stories connecting in a very deep and personal way. So next, as you begin to understand what self-awareness is, basically knowing your story and why that is important, let's shift now to the 5 chapters of your story. We could come up with 10 or 20 chapters of our story, and those might be more of like subplot chapters or sections of the chapter. But basically, in my opinion, we could boil down your life, my life story into about 5 key chapters. First of all, I would say is the family chapter. This is the ages and the stages that we grew up in, that we've lived in. Our adult family chapter, our childhood family chapter, as well as the family system. If you're not familiar with what a family system is, we're going to touch on that in just a little bit, but it's been hugely important in my life to understand my family system, the family dynamics that are at work, because it explains a lot of why we relate to each other the way we relate to each other. It explains a lot why now as a married couple, my wife acts in one way, I act in another, and how we can together work on a healthy system for our family. The second chapter is our faith chapter, and I know that this is going out to people of all different spiritual beliefs, different backgrounds, different church preferences, religious, irreligious, reverent, irreverent, believer, unbeliever, skeptic, and saint, all alike. So I don't want to make this about one particular belief system, but a faith chapter in broadest terms could also maybe be considered your worldview, which is how you make sense of the world, the lens, the eyeglass lens that you put on to make sense of this crazy world that we live in. And I don't need to remind you of how crazy this world is. It's just impossible, it seems like, on most days to make sense of it all, but we all seek to find meaning and purpose for our lives. And so that's the faith chapter. The third chapter is the community chapter. These are the supporting characters in your story. Some of them were only there for a brief moment, and other characters have been in your story for a lifetime. And they're the people who shape and mold and bring new drama and new heroic adventures into the story of your life. Fourth, let's talk about adventure. Every person, whether you're the most adventurous skydiver and camper and backpacker and going through Europe person, or whether you're a play it safe kind of a person, each of us has an adventure of trying to find our way in the world today, because it takes everything you've got, you know. It's an adventure, gang. It's an adventure. Just trying to make it through traffic in the morning is an adventure. Trying to understand your teenage daughter is an adventure. Trying to understand why your body isn't working the way it did 20 years ago is an adventure. That's how we find our way through the world. We find our calling, our purpose, our job, our interests, our hobbies, the vacations we've taken, the places we've traveled, the people we've met, these supporting characters that have crossed our paths. All of that comes together as an adventure. And finally, if I could put kind of a category or a chapter that has to deal with the deepest parts of you and I, our self-personality, our personality, our self, our soul, whatever you want to call it. It's that part of you that faces the world, not just your beautiful looks or your handsome appearance, but it's how you cope with life and loss. It's how you present yourself to the world. At 21 and 22, I presented myself as a chaotic, frenetic, frantic mess. And those that knew me back then would probably agree and like, yeah, that was crazy. You should have seen Nate back then. Those that know me now may say the same thing. There's part of that that's carried with me all these years. But how we present ourselves, how we face the world is oftentimes our personality. And oftentimes our personality has been developed by all these other things, our family, our faith, our community, the adventures that we've had, our education, our highs, our lows, our internal wiring, our brain chemistry. All of that comes together, and for some of us, it's just a matter of survival. Our personality is literally just a survival mechanism to get out of teenage years. How horrible were they? Just to get out of being a teenager took a personality, took some sort of image that we presented to the world. Sometimes it's very true to ourselves. Sometimes it's not so true to ourselves, if we're being honest. Sometimes our personality is a lot more like an imposter, a lot more like a false self than a true self. So that is only discovered as we examine the story, as we examine our life basically through these 5 chapters. And this takes a lot of time. This takes sitting down with some people that know you really well, some introspection, some journaling, some meditation, some prayer, some devotion to just exploring our inner world. It may take sitting down with a counselor, a spiritual director, a mentor, a person that knows you and is willing to dive into your story with you. So let's take a look at each of these chapters in just a little bit more detail. I'm just going to highlight a couple of keys in each of these chapters. Our familia, our family, our people, whoever that might be. For me, it was 3 ladies who helped raise me and myself that made up my primary household family. After my dad died in an accident when I was just a little baby, my mom moved in with her mom and an aunt who helped raise her. And these 3 ladies raised me. So our family was oftentimes Nate and the 3 moms, so to speak. So whatever your family looks like, it's your people. It's not every family is that great. Not every family like this family that you see on your screen would be smiling, or they might be smiling on the outside, but inside they're torn apart because of the heartache, the distrust, the pain and the suffering that has gone on in that family. So we want to recognize that family can be a source of the greatest highs and the greatest lows in our story. But each family is commonly held together by some written and unwritten rules, and part of that is your family system. How many of you had a class clown or a family jokester, prankster in your system, whether it's your immediate family or your uncles and aunts and cousins when you'd get together for the holidays? Who was the person that always was cracking jokes, that was always teasing, that always wanted to lighten the mood? That's a person's role inside of the family. Who was it in your family who just with one stern look got everybody to snap into place? For me, that was my grandmother on my dad's side of the family. She just had this look, and all my uncles and all of us grandchildren would just step into line immediately because we knew Grandma was giving us that look. Who was it in your family who wore the red cape and the giant S on their chest? Or who was it that was the Wonder Woman of the family, that went out to save everyone, that went out to protect everyone, that took it upon themselves when a member of the family was hurting or treated unfairly? Who was it that jumped into action to try to right the wrongs and bring justice to the scenario? That was a role inside of the family. I would highly encourage you to take a look at your family, see what kind of role you played inside of your family, because more than likely you've carried that role with you into adulthood, into your work life, into your family life now. If you're married, if you have children or grandchildren, there are certain roles that we play, certain ways that we operate in a family, trying to keep the peace, trying to keep the homeostasis, trying to keep the water calm, so to speak. And so that role that we play is oftentimes out of this internal feeling of trying to right the chaos, bringing peace to the chaos. Let's look at the faith chapter. However you look at it, whether a cross would be your symbol, whether the Star of David would be your symbol, whether a butterfly would represent your faith, your spiritual world, whether you don't really consider this a category, I would just invite you to explore what brings meaning and purpose to my life that is greater than myself. The great physician and the great author Atul Gawande, who wrote the seminal book Being Mortal, highly recommend it, especially for anyone in healthcare. He writes in there that in his view of the world and his work with people of all walks of life, all faith, all family, all belief systems, all ethnicities, and in his own exploration of his own culture growing up from Indian immigrant parents, he says each and every one of us needs something to hold on to that is greater than ourselves. Go back to maybe you had to read in high school, or maybe you read it recently, the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. The idea again is that we're all wired for meaning. We're all trying to make sense of this world. And so I'd encourage you to really consider, how am I making sense of this world? What do I consider to be true, right, noble, pure, trustworthy? And understand that those values are playing a part in your story, and we need to tap into that and understand that in order to care deeply and continue to grow in our compassion and empathy for other people. Now let's take a look at the community chapter. Now again, this could be the small town with one stoplight that you grew up in. It could be the inner city of Detroit. It could be a rural village in the heart of Russia. Wherever you grew up, whoever you were surrounded by, whoever you surround yourself by now, that's your community, your people. So not just the immediate family, they would be a part of that community, but think about friends, colleagues, coworkers, professors, teachers, mentors, clergy people, spiritual advisors. Who are the people that poured into you, that gave you life? Those are the people that we carry with us. I find myself so many times as I'm teaching, as I'm preaching in church, as I'm leading webinars, as I'm coaching, counseling, supporting, encouraging, bandaging wounds, whatever it might be that I'm doing, I'm beginning to be aware that I'm bringing a lot of people with me. Some might say that we're all carrying quite a bit of baggage that we carry with us in life. Well, some of that baggage could be good. If you have mentors, if you have teachers, if you have people that you read in your life that made a difference, and you carry those people with you in the best way, you are carrying your community with you as you advance hope, as you advance care for the hurting, the suffering, the troubled, and the tribulation that people are going through. So I'd encourage you, bring the best with you. Pack your bags and bring your community with you as you seek to advance hope. Let's take a look at the adventure. Got your compass out, got your GPS set with the coordinates. There are some personalities, some types of people that if you walked up to them today and said, it's Friday and at 5 o'clock, I've got 2 tickets to a secret location across the world. Are you in? Each of us probably know a friend that would drop everything and say, I'm in. I don't need to know where the destination is. I don't need to know anything. I'm in for adventure. Well, I'm not wired that way, but a few of you might be. But we all have adventures in our life. We all have to find our place in this world, navigate the twists and the turns and the dead ends, and figure out, really, where are we going? How are we getting there? That's part of our story, the places, the people, the travel that we've taken. It again plays such an important part of the puzzle, so that when we get to someone who's uncertain about their adventure. We get beside someone who's really struggling with their direction in life. We can tap into that sense in our heart, our soul, our spirit, and say, I really can empathize with that. I can really relate to that. We may not always share that story with them, but if we can tap into it in that moment, it increases our ability to care. Now our last chapter, personality. I love this picture of this lady because it's so much like personality. She's got like the Groucho Marx eyebrows and glasses and mustache on, big face, big hair, big personality as she's laying in the grass. Yet, we realize that I can see who this is, but she's still kind of wearing a mask. She's still trying to hide a piece of herself behind this mask. And that goes back to realizing that each of us, just to survive childhood, adolescence, just to survive last Friday, sometimes we have to put on the Groucho Marx glasses and just grin and bear it. But if we continue to have behaviors, we continue to present ourselves in a less than authentic way, it's as if we're walking around with a mask on and we're not really letting people see the real us, the real you. And at some level, we all do this. But there are times and occasions and people that we need to be able to take the mask off and be able to be fully seen for who we are and who we really intend to be in this world as we face this world. So I would encourage you, take a look at your personality. Recently, I feel like the words self-awareness and self-discovery have just been popping up everywhere. One of the tools that came across my desk recently in the last few months, and the bookshelves that I've been reading, the podcasts I've been listening to, is a tool called the Enneagram. And maybe you've heard of it. It's catching on like wildfire. It seems like it's the new in thing to be talking about with personalities. Whereas in the past, everyone was totally into the Myers-Briggs, totally into the DISC assessment. One of my favorites about understanding personality is the 4 animals that line up with the 4 ancient temperaments, the lion, otter, beaver, and golden retriever. So do you know how you present yourself to this world? Do you know the typical masks that you are wearing? Do you know the typical coping strategies that you put on in order just to make it through your day? If so, if you're aware of that, and if you're able to mitigate how much of that you are presenting to the world is going to be better off for it, because they're going to get the real you. They're going to get the best you, not a mask, not a pretender, not a poser or an imposter. So that's the personality chapter that really gets to the heart of who you are. And in the Enneagram language, what I love about it is that it's teaching me that there's a part of me that comes out and faces the world when I'm in stress. And there's a part of me and a piece of me that oftentimes comes out and faces the world when I'm in a good, healthy place. There's a part of me that needs to develop my less than dominant side. So if you're right-handed, that would be like strengthening your left hand. In basketball growing up, if you were right-handed, they constantly made us learn how to dribble with our left hand, shoot with our left hand, so that we could best get a shot off if we were in a lot of traffic in a basketball game. Much like all of us are either right-handed or left-handed with our personality, but we need both hands. We need both sides of us. We need those personalities that are very close and near in our proximity on the Enneagram circle to influence us. So that's another part of self-awareness, is realizing, where am I less than strong? Where are my weak points? And what can I do to strengthen them up? They may never be as strong or as dominant as the other side of me, but I can strengthen them if I continue to work with them. So that's knowing your story, why it's important, the 5 chapters. And let's take a look here about how your story unfolds. None of us get out of childhood or adolescence, even if we've had the most wonderful and amazing parents in the whole wide world, none of us get out unscathed. We may have faced a number of the things that you see on this screen. Maybe we faced loss, abandonment. Maybe we faced criticism. Maybe we felt like just all the sorrows of this world were too much to handle at times. Maybe we felt like, coming out of college or coming into a new season of life, maybe we felt a little disconnected or felt like we just didn't have our purpose or our understanding of our place in the world. Every story has a survival aspect of it. You either were survival of the fittest, or maybe you survived and denied, or maybe you were survival of fill in the blank. This might go back to that family of origin, maybe that family system. Maybe I survived by being the class clown. Maybe I survived by being the scapegoat. Maybe I survived by being super dutiful and getting straight A's. However you got out of childhood and adolescence, it's just a part of your story, because our story has twists and turns. How you got out of graduate school, how you got out of the teenage years of raising your children. Whatever that is, we have to recognize that that story of ours takes a lot of twists and turns. And we have to realize that we've all come up with survival mechanisms to get us through that. And that's part of that awareness. And another part of that awareness as our story has unfolded is recognizing times in our life when we felt safe, secure, significant, valued, where we felt included, where our voice and our presence mattered the most. And then we also need to look at the shadow side of that. When did we feel unsafe? When did we feel useless? When did we feel like an outcast? Each of us has core human needs and desires. Each of us wants to have our story fulfilled by a strong family, fulfilled by meaningful relationships, fulfilled by something greater than ourselves. But how fulfilled, how supported do you feel by your story at this point? Do you feel like there's anything lacking in your story? Are you starting to get the picture that immediately now, as we've been talking, that you've been wearing a mask? You've been walking around with a personality mask, really covering that there's still some tender spots just below the surface of your life that if people saw, maybe you're afraid that they wouldn't respect. Maybe you're afraid that they wouldn't understand because it's not like you. You put on this wonderful mask and hidden that from people, and that you're afraid now that if you showed that to them, if you showed yourself as less than perfect, maybe you're worried that they wouldn't accept you. That's part of just understanding that that's a part of our story. That's a part of coming through life. So as you see your story unfold, as you begin to assess your story, evaluate your story, as you begin to kind of look in those little hidden secret compartments that you don't like to look in very often, maybe you're realizing that you've brought forth some mottos. Maybe you've brought forth some ways of doing life in the world, like this phrase, I'll do it my way. That's a message to the world of your personality, of your story, that comes from how you've dealt with life and loss and relationships and adventure and all those chapters of your story. And if you can recognize that, then you can also recognize that that's a strength, that I can do it my way, but I also need to be able to write the message, I will ask for help. I can do it my way, but I may need to do it your way as well. Maybe this has been a life motto for you. Dream big and make it happen. I tend to relate to this one. Dream big. Boy, the dreams are big. I can never get enough of the big dreams, the big vision, the big ideas. But making it happen, well, maybe I'll save that for another day. But in all honesty, when I do see a big dream in front of me, it motivates me to make it happen. That's why I do these training sessions, because I just dream big about the potential that all these agents of hope out there, all these amazing people that are doing their best to raise their family, care for their grandkids, devote time to caring for hospice patients, devote time to volunteering at the rescue mission, devote time to being at the animal shelter, devote time to caring for the children in your classroom. I know you've got big dreams if you just own it, if you just are awake to it, awaken to it. And I know that a lot of us carry with us this mantra, I'm just going to make it happen. But maybe I need to be more careful about how I define that. How I make it happen may need to look a little differently. That's that awareness piece that we need to develop in us. Ultimately, I hope that you see this. Your story drives your behavior. If you are not aware of how your story drives your behavior, then you're going to run into what I call landmines in the story. And there are common landmines as we try to help other people, as we try to advance hope at home, advance hope in the community, and advance hope beyond our wildest imagination. Our stories sometimes get so close together with another person that we're trying to help, it's like railroad tracks. And if my tracks get really close to the person next to me that I'm trying to help, I'm very tempted to jump the tracks and make my story their story and make my way of doing things, push it onto them. And that's really not going to help them. That's a landmine that usually self-destructs the caregiving relationship. You know, all of us have pet peeves. All of us have different preferences, different ways of doing things. But if we're not healthy and we're not self-aware, oftentimes these irritations get under our skin and we can just like lash out at somebody because they're doing something that is just completely annoying to us. And that could be a colleague, a coworker, a family member, even a person you're trying to help who's in a world of hurt. If they have a common behavior of their story that you're hearing over and over and over, and it's just an irritation that gets under your skin, you have to watch out. If you're not aware that that's irritating you and that that's bugging you, you may be tempted to just blow up in that moment. Oh, the common Mr. or Mrs. Fix-It. Oftentimes we know it. We know exactly what the problem is, know exactly what the solution is. We just have to help them solve it and help them solve it in 5 easy steps, and this should all be good in about 5 minutes. We realize that that's not a good strategy at all times. Sometimes someone wants us to help them have a 5-minute fix, and if we can give them a 5-minute fix and that's the agreed upon solution, have at it. But for many difficult and complex situations in people's lives, a common landmine is just trying to fix it. The family role, again, this I cannot overemphasize. Whether you realize you're a scapegoat type of person, you always blame other people, or you were the class clown, the family clown, you were the super hyper reasonable one, whatever that might be. If you push that onto someone else, or if you constantly act out in that way, it has a way of coming back and hurting us, coming back and biting us. Another common landmine is, again, I just see so many people self-destructing, just bad behavior, bad practices, lacking rhythm in their life, lacking a refueling of their soul after giving and giving and giving, which leads to burnout, which, you know, we cover up the burnout by even more busyness, which doesn't help things at all. So how do we avoid the landmines? Self-awareness helps us avoid the landmines because of the preparation and practice. Putting in periods of time for preparation and practice help us to avoid the landmines. Journaling, practicing prayer and meditation, just reviewing, okay, are there any landmines that are potentially out there as I work with this person? If we can avoid the landmines that we are aware of, we can't avoid the landmines that just pop up out of nowhere, but we can avoid where we know that our stories could collide. Need to know your limits. We need to know that there's just a certain point where my energy, my patience, my ability to care is going to run out, and that's okay. Give yourself permission to know your limits and have a backup plan for when you reach that point so you can keep your boundaries. And again, monitor that internal responses. Have I been irritable lately? Have I been overly emotional about the people I'm trying to help lately? Am I just so stressed with my family situation that I just can't even think straight to try to begin to care for this situation at work or this situation where I volunteer? Call for help. Live for another day. Do not just Keep pushing forward when you're not at your best, because you're going to hit a landmine that could have easily been avoided. We'll all hit a landmine once in a while. I've hit my fair share of them. But if you can avoid the ones that are obvious and avoid the ones that we are aware of, then you limit the damage. You limit the opportunities for those to come up and cause destruction. So finally, let's take a look at some resources for our story. In each of these chapters of your story, I highlighted some resources I'd encourage you to take a look at. For the family, I'd encourage you to take a look at Bowen Family Systems or Virginia Satir's work in family systems. Do your own genogram. Do your own family tree. It's so helpful to look at the ways, the patterns of relating, the struggles, the trials that have passed on from generation to generation. I mentioned a couple of things in the faith category already. If you're a YouTuber, I'd highly encourage you to take a look at the Soul Pancake channel on YouTube. They have a series of videos called Have a Little Faith. Super helpful, super fun, exciting to watch those just because they keep it real, they keep it light, and yet they're very insightful about how faith plays a broader role in people's lives. The community. Think about the importance of community in this kind of individualized world. I put some books on there to check out, Bowling Alone and Tribes and We're All Weird. I haven't read We're All Weird, but I can't wait to. That sounds exciting to me. Adventure, life map. Draw your story. Focus on hills and valleys. Map the adventure that you've been on. And for personality, again, I would highly, highly encourage you, explore the Enneagram. I just have found it to be an amazing tool and resource. It's not the perfect resource. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's one of many really good resources out there. But this one is really helpful in terms of seeing the highs and the lows, seeing the health and the lack of health, seeing the dominant and the weaker sides of our personality, where we can grow, where we can learn. And it also helps because it taps into what's called centers of intelligence, how we process knowledge and information. Are we a feeler, a thinker, or a doer? And those are just kind of my own phrases of how that concept gets played out. I'd highly recommend the Typology podcast by Ian Morgan Cron as he explores the human condition through the lens of the Enneagram. It's just really been opening my eyes and giving me language and making sense of why on earth do I do the stupid things that I do sometimes. So if you need help answering that question, I'd highly encourage you to take a look at that. So today, I hope that we can grow in our self-awareness, that we can grow in our learning and listening and evaluating of our own story, the 5 chapters of our story, so that we can kind of wake up, so we can open our eyes, whether it's for the first time or the 100th time, for a lifetime of self-awareness, because that is such a huge key to better care. You will advance so much more hope in your world for those that you love in your family, for those that you're called to serve in your community, for those even you haven't even met yet beyond your wildest imagination. If you wake up to your own story, get healthy in your own story, it will lead to better care. Thank you again so much for joining me today. Thank you for advancing hope in your world. I look forward to sharing more resources with you, and in the notes section below this video, if you want to find out more, if you want to get more support, join a community of agents of hope who are out there advancing hope. There's ways to subscribe to my ongoing Hope Connection resources. Thank you again so much. This has been Nate Gustafson with the Hope Connection webinar, Growing in Self-Awareness.